So good evening, good afternoon, and good morning to each and everyone. Thank you so much for taking your time to join this session. And yes, so yeah, so yeah, my name is Soumya, and I have a pleasure of hosting this very special masterclass today, where our trainer, Mr. Abhiroop, will walk you through this session. And to tell you more about Abhiroop, he has 19 plus years of experience in B2B and B2C software product lifecycle and ideation, MVP, post-revenue growth stage, late stage, re-architecting and modernizing, high scale, and multi-modernizing, a multi-country complex production environments, customer implementations, customer onboarding, pre-sales, sales, sales support, product roadmap and release, and many of them again. And we have planned this session today as a very fun and engaging session. So please sending in your comments and also suggestions, and especially the questions you have, so that we do not miss any of them. And we will answer them for sure at the end of the session. And before we dive deeper into the session today, there's a very quick poll, a very basic poll. Let me launch the poll for you. Please take a moment to answer the poll questions. Yes, here it is. So, where are you from? And how many years of relevant software or IT experience you have? And are you currently working on AWS or any other cloud? So these are the poll questions. Right. Another 20% of them have to answer. Okay. Abhirup, I hope you're able to see the poll, and yeah.
Yeah, I can see it. Yeah.
So 75% are from India, and 50% are a student or up to 1 year experience, and 50% are 5 to 10 years experience, and 100% are not working currently in any AWS or cloud. Yeah, so I'm ending the poll here. Thank you for participating. Yeah. Yes, so here you go, Abhiroop. The stage is for you.
Yeah, thanks, Soumya. Hi, everybody. My name is Abhiroop, and I have about 8 years experience in working on AWS, building specifically software products, SaaS products, and mostly building cloud-native applications on AWS cloud, and also migrating or re-engineering applications into cloud-native applications. Okay, and obviously, so I can talk about the prospects of doing this AWS Solution Architect certification, and I will take you through some of my experiences in very brief. So let's first look at Soumya. So can you go through the index, the agenda slide? Yeah. So we'll talk about what's cloud computing, and particularly with AWS, and what does the solution architect do? Okay, so and solution architect obviously is a roadmap, but what actually a role of a solution architect do, and how important it is, then why AWS, and then talk about some of the parameters or the data about demand for AWS architects, and then we'll go into the certification details and how to prepare. Yeah. So if you can go to the next slide, please. Okay. So cloud computing is very simply renting out servers, right? So initially we have this data center model wherein every company had their own data center, and in the last more than a decade, this concept came in that why do you want to do an capex, right? Why do you want to buy hardware upfront? Why can't we rent it out on demand? Okay, so that's where cloud computing was born. It's a model for on-demand network access to computers. And when I say computers, it's a kind of servers. You have kind of CPU, RAM, storage, different kinds of storage, networking components, applications, and service and other services. Okay, so the software services and the hardware infra, you can actually access on demand on a pay-as-you-go model. Okay, and that's what is cloud computing about. And this brings a lot of flexibility. You can scale up and scale down as required, as per the user's workload or requirements, business requirements, and you can manage your expenses in a pretty optimal way by using cloud. Okay, yeah. So out of all the cloud providers, there are usually 5 major cloud providers in the market. AWS is the leading cloud provider. The other ones are Azure, which is number 2nd. Third is Google Cloud. Oracle is coming up. Alibaba Cloud is there, and we have UI Cloud also, which is recently started. But mostly AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud platform have a majority of the market share. AWS has been a pioneer, has been the leading innovator in the space of cloud computing. The cloud computing actually started with AWS being one of the leading players very early on. So it still dominates the market. And most of the companies you see globally, especially in the US, in India, and many other countries, they majorly use AWS. So there's a huge demand for AWS professionals across the world. And if somebody learns AWS, they're also able to work on other clouds, because the other clouds work in a very similar way as AWS. Yep. Okay. So we'll talk about what a cloud solution architect does. Okay. Now the first thing is, I'll just bring it down. Okay. So when you have a requirement for building an application, the solution architect is the person who owns the architecture. Okay, so it designs the system in a way that use the components of AWS, provide the AWS services rather, and there is an architecture which has to be designed by the cloud solution architect, working in collaboration with the business and the other technical stakeholders. Okay, so it's very important. The application needs to be robust enough, and that's defined by how well the architecture is. And so when you talk about the architecture, it's here the high level design of the system on the cloud is what the cloud solution architect is responsible for. Okay, then he's responsible for tweaking and optimizing the design. So you make a design, you make an architecture, or rather you design an architecture, and it goes into production, or it goes into testing before going to production. There are bugs and issues, right? So and there might be other requirements coming in. So the architecture needs a constant monitoring for to make sure that it works as per the business requirements. And also they are constant. There can be a need for changing or revising or updating the architecture to bring in new capabilities and also to fix existing issues. So architecture is always kind of evolving, I would say, area in the sense that you have to always optimize your product from architecture point of view, product or application. Okay. Now AWS has a framework called AWS Well Architected Framework, which I will show you very briefly. And all the architecture and design work which architect does has to be ideally in line with the well architected framework. That's the AWS recommendation, right? And that's one of the things. The well architected framework is covered in the certification exams as well. Also, the architect makes sure that the solution, the application of the product which they're designing, okay, they're responsible for the architecture for that product or app. It meets a customer's function, non-function, and other technical requirements in the best possible way. Okay, can go to the next. Yeah. So solution architect, if you want to become a good solution architect, right? Solution architect needs to work with different components, different services. Okay, so it's a consolidation of multiple skills, and a good solution architect has to be pretty skilled in designing, implementing, and managing well-architected cloud-native applications. Cloud-native is an application born in the cloud, which uses the capabilities and the technologies of the cloud in the best possible way. Okay. If you try to install a cloud-native application in our data center, it may or may not work as efficiently. But the cloud-native application is optimized for, from a performance, cost, security, and other factors on the cloud. So it performs pretty well on the cloud. Okay. So cloud native is a term which you will hear very frequently, but this has come into being in the last 5-6 years only. Yeah. So here there are two things. The best practices of architecture as per AWS are being referenced in the well-architected framework and the AWS reference architectures, which I can just show you very shortly. So this is, if you search for AWS well-architected framework, this is the site. You can just Google, it will find out. And here you have to go, and there are 6 pillars for architecting an application, right? So, and there are criteria given here. There are good leading practices, good practices given here. So when you design an architecture, you have to actually be pretty thorough with these pillars. Okay, what they're saying, and the do's and don'ts checklists. Okay, and that will actually, these are kind of guidelines for you to build good, robust architectures. Okay, and this is something which is covered as part of the certification exam. Apart from these, you have reference architectures. So if you Google or AWS reference architectures.
Sorry to interrupt, Abhiroop. So are you sharing your screen?
Oh, sorry. Let me just share the screen. I'm sorry. Okay. Let me know if you're able to see the screen.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Anybody has any questions so far on whatever we have covered? Okay, I will just show you this. If you search for AWS well architected on Google, you will find this site. If you come here, there are 6 pillars. Okay, the operational excellence, security, reliability, cost, performance. These are the 5 pillars which are more important. So when you're designing an architecture, you actually have to go through the best practices given under each pillar, and this is something which is covered in the certification exam. Okay, and this is about the well-architected framework. You can also look at reference architectures. So AWS provides different reference architectures, which is, for example, if you want to, let's say you want to do a clickstream analytics, right? So this is a reference architecture, a best practice architecture. Reference architectures are best practice or leading practice architectures, right? So if you want to start from scratch, you have something to start with, and this is something which AWS recommends to use. Okay, and then this you can modify. So you might be using 50% or 30% or 20% of it. I think this is click here to enlarge. Okay, anyway, so I will not go into details, but I will just put a link here. If you want, you can just check out later on. I'm just putting in the chat. So you can explore the architectures. So the architectures will actually show you how different AWS services are combined together. Okay, and you can also go and look at well-architected framework over here. Yeah, moving back to the presentation. Yeah, so I will just stop sharing, and yeah, you can just share the presentation. Oh, Soumya, should I share the presentation?
Yes, Abhiroop, that would be best.
Yeah, I think that would be better. Okay, hey guys. Okay, so we were at what a solution architect does. It's a very challenging role, and it's a very exciting role. A lot of learning here, and a lot of upskilling or constant learning is involved in this role as well. But it's a well-paid role. It's a pretty well-paid and well-respected role. Okay, so so there are job requirements on um, for AWS architects. You can just go to LinkedIn. You can always look into jobs section, and you can find some of the JDs, or you can go to the AWS website and you can always find it. AWS architect, right? And you can say United States. Yeah, so it's always good to look at AWS architect in United States. And oh, I think there's some restriction here, but if you look at the what architect does, um, or rather, let me just put in India. So look at what a cloud architect does usually. Uh, okay, I think there's some issue with the browser here, but I'll just share this with you. You can always look at the some sample JDs of AWS architects and see cloud architects, in fact, and what they do, what kind of requirements are there. Yeah. So this is pretty simple research which you can do online, and I hope some of you might have already done this kind of research before. Okay. Um, Now, why learn AWS? Okay, so first thing is AWS in terms of maturity, right? So let me tell you my experience of working across AWS, Google Cloud, and Azure, right? So if I find, and most people find AWS as the most mature cloud. So when they release some new features, the number of bugs are quite less relative to other clouds. Okay, and that's the observation which I had, and and a lot of things which AWS releases, like for example, they release serverless concept, right? Serverless computing with AWS Lambda, and that was a pioneer. The other cloud providers also followed what AWS did, right? So AWS has been a leader in innovation, in innovating, and also the product quality has usually been quite good. The number of bugs or errors you get, because of issues in the AWS services is usually less relative to other cloud providers. Okay, and if you look here, this is the Gartner quadrant. This Gartner is the leading analyst, which they publish a Magic Quadrant, and every year usually you will see AWS coming on top. But if you see the gap between AWS and Microsoft and Google, is humongous, right? It's a big gap. So it's kind of a leader, and then nobody else is near to AWS. Yeah. Um, So this is again in terms of the growth in the revenue of AWS, and why I'm showing this is, you can see the more the revenue of AWS grows, the more the demand for skilled AWS professionals also grows, because now more customers are using AWS services, so they need more people also to build applications on this AWS services. So see, from $3 billion within 10 years, right, it went to $80 billion. It's a humongous growth. Yeah. Okay. Now, in terms of the market share, also, if you look at AWS's market share globally, compared with Azure and Google Cloud and others, it has the highest market share among cloud providers. And usually, customers who have been building with the cloud, usually they don't change so fast to a new cloud, right? So if somebody has chosen AWS as the platform, they will keep building more. So that means more consumption of AWS will happen in that particular customer. And in terms of the market share by countries, you can look at, I see some people are from US. So US, you see the market share is 33%. Some are from India, so 32% market share. So it's a leading cloud actually. You have a lot more jobs in AWS than in other clouds, if you look at the job market. Yeah. Okay. Now, AWS, I will talk about the different focus markets. Now, one of them, so obviously, US is a focus market. There are India, there are a few other countries. But if you are in India, for example, AWS has made some big announcements for investing $12.7 billion. This is a recent announcement. So they are actually investing a lot, which means that they will create. They're talking about creating these many new jobs, but obviously the actual number of jobs may be different, can be higher as well. But you can see AWS has a lot of investment committed already, and they are also committing more to grow in this market. And there have been a lot of cloud, lot of digital demand in India, from government building digital apps to companies building their own digital apps and their product companies and startups as well. You can see that Amazon in particular, they are investing $26 billion, out of which a lot of it will go into technology also. And the technology of Amazon is actually majorly on AWS. Yeah. Okay. So if you're across the world, right? Now, one indicator of growth in a geography is to look at which regions or which geographies of the world AWS is creating its own regions. Now, what is a AWS region? AWS region is a group of data centers co-located, in a kind of few square kilometers radius, right, or few square mile radius. Okay, in one city, for example. Okay, or kind of one location, right? So it's spread out over few square miles. Yeah. So if you see 2020 to 2023, AWS is actually creating or has created new regions, which are huge amounts of data, huge number of servers stacked in multiple data centers which are near to each other, different buildings in a and each building is hosting a lot of servers and network infrastructure and storage infrastructure, right? So Phoenix, Arizona, they have put up a massive region. Asia Pacific, they have a region, Asia Pacific region in Melbourne, Australia. So they're expanding obviously in the US. They are expanding in Australia. Obviously, Israel is one. Malaysia, India, they're expanding. Then Switzerland, Spain, so Europe, UAE. So it's all over the world they're expanding. But these are some of the indicators that in these countries in specific, you will have more growth because they have actually, wherever the new region comes in, the customers can store data locally in those countries, right? So they will prefer a cloud vendor, a cloud platform provider, which has a local presence, because governments have data localization rules either already there or coming soon. Okay, so having data located in the same country is what a lot of customers want. So this is an indicator of where the growth in AWS job market would be. Okay. Now, to look at the demand for AWS architects, right? If we just do a very simple thing. Now, obviously, not all jobs are on LinkedIn. There are many jobs which are outside of LinkedIn as well. There are many other websites, but LinkedIn is one of the leading indicators. You can just go and search in the jobs section, and you can see. Again, this was taken in August. It's kind of a not a very good time for the job market, but still in a market like this, you see that there are almost 6,000 job requirements in the US, and for architects and for engineers, this is about 23,000. Okay, and similarly, you can look at the major three markets, US, India, and UK. There's a good amount of demand right now also. If you had looked at 1 year back, same time, it would have been much higher. But obviously, because of the slack demand right now, the kind of the global economic scenario, the demand is less, but still it's quite substantial. Yeah. Okay. So about the exam, the Solution Architect Associate exam is something which can be a very good start point for you to start your journey on AWS, and also to put in place a roadmap to become an architect. Okay, eventually, obviously, to become an architect, you need very good work experience as well. But this actually gets you started. So let's say if you're a developer or a DevOps guy or an infra person, okay, or you can be a data engineer also, or machine learning engineer, right? This certification is very valuable if you're working on AWS cloud or any other cloud also. Okay, I mean, obviously, if you're working Google and others, you can do those certifications, but AWS certification also is relevant if you work in AWS and any other like multi-cloud as well. Okay, so here the questions are usually very practical oriented. they will be very scenario based. Okay, so we'll talk about a scenario, a customer problem or a kind of architecture or design decision point, right? And what option you will have or how do you approach, right? So those kind of skills are ideally tested in these certifications. And obviously what you have to do is you have to actually prepare well for certification, go through a certification program, which kind of a course which teaches you about the how to approach the certification exams, or rather the questions of the certification exam, and it will teach you the theory, the concepts. Okay, so you have to go through this rigorous preparation, and there are about 65 questions, time limit 130 minutes. Okay, it's mostly MCQs, but some of the MCQs are a bit confusing, so you need to do pretty good practice as well. Oh, it is going. Any questions so far? Okay. So what does certification test? What does certification exam test? In fact, it's your skills in these different services. Now, AWS services you can compartmentalize into compute, networking, storage, database, deployment, and management services. Okay, so this is how you kind of think in these 5 or 6 blocks. Okay, and then you expand further. So it actually tests your skills and your understanding of these different services under these brackets, and also how these services work each other, right? How do you connect with each other and kind of build an entire end-to-end application? Okay. We're obviously not going into the details of coding here. So the solution architect usually has to do less coding, or very, kind of, it can be scripting, it can be some code reviews, but usually the amount of coding to be done is less. It depends on the nature of the company as well. If some product company has a very hands-on culture, the amount of coding done by the solution architect can be higher. But in many IT service companies, the work you do for the customer, the amount of coding can be very less or almost zero as well. Okay, if you're a solution architect. Yeah. So again, it tests the knowledge in deploying, managing, and operating AWS workloads, implementing security and compliance as well. Okay, and the ability to identify which. So you have a technical requirement, and there are multiple AWS services. Some AWS services does the similar kind of things. For example, database, right? There are multiple database options available. So for a given requirement, which database you will be using, right? So you have to identify that. That's a skill which is tested in the certification exams. Okay. You define technical requirements for AWS based applications. So how do you define the technical requirements? So the technical design, right? So that is tested, and identify which services. Yeah. So it's the same thing. Okay. So I will just show you some bit about the certification. I will just give you a walkthrough. So this is a certification guide. You can see MCQs. And if you go to those topics, okay, so you can see, because the solution architect, it tests your design skills, right? So you see the 30% is how to create secure architectures, and resilient is very important. Okay, nowadays, cost optimize is also very important, because what happens in cloud, you build something and the cost goes up, right? So it's very hard to budget the cost. Okay, so companies value those who can actually create cost optimized architectures. Okay, so now if you look at secure, now security is very important, because if the cloud is not secure, the customers will not build applications on the cloud, right? That's one of the very leading things. So security and cost are usually very important as well. Okay, if it's very costly, then obviously you will be using your own data center, right? You will actually buy a server instead of renting out. So security I will not cover much, but resilient architectures. So if there is failure, if there's a failure, it's actually the application or the workload is able to recover quickly, right? So it's kind of, it's highly available. Okay, it's mostly up and running. Okay, it is not going down. Okay, so that kind of so how do you build those kind of architectures using the AWS services, right? So you can see there are concepts like this which are cloud agnostic. Okay, so this is cloud agnostic concepts, caching strategies and those, and there are concepts which are cloud specific. So AWS managed services, for example, the secrets manager, SQS is very popular. Okay, then you see that there is AWS Lambda, which is serverless compute, AWS Fargate, it's container service, right? So you will learn about, in the certification prep, that what are these services, how they work, okay, how you bring them together in a end-to-end architecture. Yeah. So certification guide, I'm just putting a link to it. You can even Google and find out.
Abhiroop, we have a person who is raising his hand. So do you want to pick his question?
Oh, sure, definitely. We can. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes, Siddesh, you can talk now.
Yeah, Sujesh, I think you're on mute.
He had a question in the chat box. So, what kind of suggestion
Oh,
you will give for the freshers, and how to improve the skills? So, as I'm learning AWS from upgrad, so what kind of suggestion or advice you will give to a fresher?
okay. Um, so AWS, there are two things, right? One is what you learn by going through courses or videos, okay, and blogs. And the second thing is your practice. You're actually implementing things, okay. But so there are two things, right? So now, if you have access to, or rather, if you have access to AWS, if you are working as an intern or kind of employee somewhere, then you will get the practice. If you don't have the practice, then what you do is you watch videos. Okay, so simple example is you go to AWS My Architecture. Okay, so you go to this My Architecture. There are a lot of videos here about customers explaining the architecture and why they chose those architectures, why those chose their services. Okay, so this is one thing you should do. So it will give you, for example, if you go down, okay, there is this 3M talking about serverless workflows. Okay, so you can go through these. I think you should regularly go through these and make notes. So these are 5-6 minute videos, maximum 10 minutes videos, not more than that. Okay, so this is one thing you should do. The second thing you should do is, so let's say I will show you here. I have AWS open. Okay. So now let's say AWS Lambda. Okay. Now you can obviously take a AWS account. Okay. You just need a credit card, and they give you a free tier. So there is something called a AWS free tier. So some of the services are free up to a limit. Okay. So you have to go to the free tier, and suppose you take a AWS account. For the first year, you will have the free tier. So you can see that for first 12 months, EC2 750 hours is free, S3 5G free, right? So you can practice a bit. Okay, so you can create a EC2 instance. You can actually stop and start EC2 instance. You can upload some data in S3. You see how it works. Okay, so basic things you can try out from here. Okay, so I'm just sending the link here to you. So yeah, you can take account. You can just try out things which are in the free tier, but just remember to stop it when you are exiting, because otherwise it will charge you. Okay, so you get a feel of AWS by taking an account and using the free tier. Okay, then you go to the My Architecture videos. You see the architecture videos. Now let's say the third thing what you can do is, let's say you have to create Lambda, right? You have to practice. Now if you use more of the services, Lambda is serverless, so it usually don't charge you. You have a very generous tier. Okay, sorry, it went to something else. AWS Lambda. So if you want to see how end-to-end, how to create a Lambda function, you go to YouTube. This is a very important trick. Go to YouTube, AWS Lambda hands-on, step by step. Just search for it like this. Okay, you will see tutorials. Now the tutorials will have the screenshots. You can see the screens, right? So you can create some document where you can just copy paste the screen step by step. Okay, so then that document you can print out and you can go through it. Okay, or rather if you yeah, so I will just show you here. See these videos, they are actually showing you how how to do things, right? So the steps are given already. Okay, so what happens, you just create a document where you take the screenshots, so which means that you actually, instead of doing it in the system, right, you're simulating now. Okay, so you know how to do, what are the steps to do something. So in AWS, mostly there are, if you use any service, there are few steps, 5 steps, 3 steps, 4 steps, 10 steps, right? So if you know the steps, like each screen what you have to configure, then you're good. Okay, so even if you don't have practice, you can just go and take the kind of see these videos, the step by step approach. If you want a Fargate, you can say AWS Fargate step by step. Okay, so you will get the videos, you can go through the videos, and you can see the demos. Okay, so this is a very good way of learning. But you capture the screenshots and the documentation somewhere. Okay, so you make some notes, and also you put the screenshots in a presentation or a Word. Okay, so you can kind of create your own documents which you can go through. So that's a good supplement to not having a real work experience. Yeah, any other questions?
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay. So the certification, so the knowledge and skills you acquire for certification. Okay. Now, obviously, doing certifications, properly, it gives you a lot of knowledge. Okay. So don't just go through the dumps for exam preparation. You actually go through the certification prep program for gaining real knowledge, because clearing certification is one thing. You can kind of go through the dumps, and there are sample questions, and then you will get similar questions and you can kind of clear. But the concepts which you get in the certification exam, right, the problems which you get in the exam questions, you actually will be using them in your day-to-day life when you work as a AWS engineer or going forward as architect. Okay, so be very thorough with the knowledge. So you should be able to understand how to use the well-architected framework of AWS, how to design solutions with optimal usage of, okay, the most optimal use of compute, storage, and network and other services. Okay, as per the AWS recommendation, and AWS recommendations are packaged as part of the well-architected framework and the reference architectures. Okay, even you can go through the AWS blogs. You just Google for AWS blog, for Lambda, AWS blog, for Fargate, for EC2. Okay, for every topic here, AWS blogs. So they give a lot of good practices. So you have to constantly read and make notes. And obviously how to identify the right AWS services, right? So given a requirement from the business, you should be able to build something very optimally using the right set of AWS services, architected or stitched together in the proper way. Okay, so any other questions? Okay, very quick FAQs. I'll just cover in 2 minutes. So coding skills. Now, usually for architect, you don't have to do coding to an extent a developer or a data engineer does. Okay, so the coding, there can be some coding, but it's ideally some Python scripts. Okay, you might need some TypeScript, JavaScript or TypeScript. Okay, some shell scripting. You might use some YAML. You might use some Terraform. Okay, but these are very basic declarative languages. Okay, very easy to learn. So not heavy coding. Okay, so somebody who is not very comfortable or don't want to get into a coding heavy job, this is a pretty good area to start with. It's a kind of high paying area also, a lot of value. becoming a kind of person adept in using the AWS services. And sometimes for basic things like scheduling a job, right? Creating a job, scheduling a job, transferring data from one place to another, you might have to write some code. Okay, but a lot of them also are getting automated. You know, 5 years back where you had to write code, now you just have to do configurations. So there are many scenarios like those. Specific skills to become a cloud architect. So you can just read through it. I will not go through the details, but compute, storage, databases, networking, security, and DevOps deployment. These are the basic things. Okay. On top of it, you have well architected. Now, application goes in production. You have to monitor it to observe it. So there's a concept of observability. Programming, if you know, it's very good. Okay, because ultimately will be the architect also will be creating a solution where a code is deployed on the on the cloud, right? So code deployment obviously will be there. So you need to have, if you have some programming knowledge, is good. Okay, ideally it's recommended, highly recommended. We work a lot with microservice and APIs. Cloud native architectures requires a lot of microservice and API based design. And some shell scripting, Linux, you know, you will be installing the virtual machines on Linux. Yeah. So yeah, that's it, I think. Any other questions you have?
Any questions? If you're unable to talk, you can always text in the Q&A window so that we do not miss any questions. So if you want to talk to Abhiroop, then you can raise your hand. I will allow you to talk.
Okay. So I'm just stopping my sharing. So yeah, just over to you.
Yeah. I think we have a question.
Yeah, I'm just seeing the chat. Oh, sorry, the Q&A. Okay. Okay. So Fred, what's your kind of which stage are you? Have you just graduated? Okay. And I'm presuming you're in the US, right? Which part of the US, or which city or state? Okay, you have 2 years of non-technical experience. See, you can try. Okay. Now, so if you have 2 years non-tech experience, you ideally will be considered as a fresher in the IT industry. The easiest way, I think, is to get into a cloud infra job, especially in monitoring. Okay, so if you want to enter, I'm just talking about if you want to enter, right? So jobs where you have kind of, okay, so there is a production workload, there is some application which is running and you have to monitor it, okay, and manage it, maintain it, so kind of support. Okay, so those kind of jobs you can look for. I would say start with the IT service companies ideally. It is easier to get in. Once you have get in and get some better experience, then you can obviously change to a better company, and it can also be a product company, depending on what kind of skills you gain in the initial years. Yeah. Okay, Siddesh, I can see. Okay, and this is a question I think, Soumya, you want to take?
I've answered, yeah.
Okay, I've answered already. Okay.
So any other questions? Okay. Okay, Frederick says thank you. Thank you, Frederick, for the question. Anybody else? All right, let's see what KnowledgeHut has to offer. So this is what KnowledgeHut's outcome focused program. So AWS Certified Solution Architect Associate Training. This is a training name, and you'll have all this learn from the best in live sessions as well as on your own schedule, and ace the exam with simulations and refine your skills with practice questions, and immerse yourself in hands-on labs and build real world projects, and leverage our tried and tested first attempt success strategy, and curated step-by-step exam guides mapped to the official AWS exam guide. Yeah, so across as a KH as a, we have 4,50,000 plus professional trained, and 250 plus workshop every month we do, and it is in more than 100 plus countries, and it is still counting. Yeah. Yeah, so for the people who are already in the session today, we have a very special offer. So you can use this Master Cloud as the coupon code when you're registering for the session. You'll have discounts on the courses. This is very limited time offer. You can choose this. This I will put in the chat also for your reference. The coupon code is Master Cloud. Yeah, this is the coupon. You can use this while you're registering. All right. So any other questions? I think we have a question. Yes, Frederick. So would gaining more AWS certification comes with better job opportunities?
I can just take it. So again, if you have more certifications, then obviously your knowledge spectrum will be higher. So I would say in a way, yes, but you have to actually complement it with real work experience as well. So basically, you have to crack the interviews. Okay, so you can get more certifications. And I would suggest if you have a certification, a generic certification like Solution Architect Associate, you can go for a professional, or you can go for a specialty certification like a DevOps or networking, so which will deep specialize you in a particular area, right? So Solution Architect is more general certification which covers multiple areas, but you can go for a deeper specialization like a networking or DevOps, or I would say a sysops certification as well, or you can go for a data engineering certification. Yeah. So I would say combining a general certification and the specialty certification can be a good strategy. But you have to actually prepare well for the interviews, because you have to also crack the interviews. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Frederick, for the question, and thank you so much for answering the question. I hope this answered your question, Frederick. Have any other questions?
So, which was your first certification in AWS?
Oh, so you're asking what should be the first certification you should do in AWS?
Yeah.
Yeah. See, I would always suggest don't go for the cloud practitioner. Go for the solution architect associate. Okay, and that's a real certification. Okay, which will give you the skills which you need. The thought process, the way of thinking you need to get into and work as a AWS engineer. Okay, and start on the path of becoming a solution architect. Right. So the right kind of structure, the thought process, the knowledge which you need, it starts from the solution architect associate. Okay. But I would say if you want to do more certifications, you combine it up with a specialty certification. Okay, in a very specific area like a DevOps or networking, or machine learning, or I would say data engineering. Ideally, machine learning is a very specialized area, so I would say you don't need a solution architect certification if you are in ML. But for other areas like DevOps, I would say you can combine a solution architect associate and a professional certification with so if you are experienced, then you can directly go for a solution architect professional certification. If you have 0 to 2 years experience or no experience, then you go for a solution architect associate certification. But top it up, combine it with a specialty certification like a DevOps. Yeah. DevOps is a kind of very in demand skill right now, so I would recommend you can go with DevOps. If you are good in Python, you want to work on the data side of things, the data, working with a lot of data, structured, unstructured, then you can go for the data engineer certification also as a specialty certification. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Siddesh. Thank you, Abhiroop.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So if we do not have any questions coming in, I hope we are good to wrap the session, Abhiroop. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
It was
Okay.
a very
Thanks,
insightful
everybody.
session. Yes.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Yeah. Have a great evening, everyone. Thank you. See you all in the next sessions. Please visit KnowledgeHut website for more such masterclasses, and please get registered. Yeah. And we have more sessions, with Abhiroop also. So yeah, please visit our KnowledgeHut website. Got me inspired. Thank you. Thank you, Frederick.